all of those watching who aren't part of the team but very interested in seeing what we're doing. We've got another awesome stream for you this week. Today we have our special guest Javier on. Javier, do you want to just give you a quick who you are, what you do?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. My name is Javier. I'm currently a lead material artist at PlayStation. Been in the industry for about 12 years. If you've entered the previous ArtStation challenges, you probably know my name through me judging on that stuff. So really happy and glad that Aaron's brought me back for Titan and continue to give my feedback and advice on the project. So happy to be here.
Yeah, we've got a couple of wandering critics, and Javier's one of them. We're going to have a few more on as well. So week after next, we're going to have another, and then I think the last week of this month we will have our final wandering critic on. So they have been traversing the Titan game world, finding artwork that needs improving and telling
Yep.
people how to go about doing it. So they've been very helpful to those people who are participating. Before we dive into this lovely critique session, we need to have a big thank you to our partners, AWS, who are funding the entire server costs of Project Titan, so all of the back end, and of course Perforce as well, who are kind of providing the software licenses for Perforce software, which allows us to do this whole project and collaborate with. I think, what was the final count, Seb? Do you remember? I think it was like 4,100 participants that we have in the project, something like that.
4,126, I think.
Yeah,
That's what the
crikey.
last count.
So yeah, that's kind of with both those teams kind of helping us make sure that this runs and runs smoothly. So big thanks to them as always. So we'll kick off with a little review of some of the cool stuff that we're seeing in Project Titan. Obviously, all the people who are working in the project get to see it all the time. But for those of you who don't have access, you only get these little sneak previews. So if we switch to my screen, I'm going to just run through a few awesome environments that are currently being worked on. So this is our current splash screen for the week. It's this lovely village. We keep seeing this thing being iterated on time and time again. Some really lovely stuff going on here. So this is beautiful little village. With lots of fields and some really nice design flow as well. When you run around it, it kind of feels like it's a good size and so on. So some great stuff going on there. We've had this recently added, so someone a bit late to the party on the submission, but they've got some great design coming on here. Lots of verticality in it, lots of areas where you can kind of go under and over and above. Lots of height and variation in there, so some really nice stuff there, and some great character in the buildings that they're working on as well. Then we have the volcanic region, which has taken on a kind of like a death metal album cover vibe, looking really cool. And in fact, if you go to nighttime, you get some even more kind of funkiness in there as well. So some really cool stuff going on there. Keep up the good work. The Canyon team, or the desert team, have been building out these amazing buttes. Some really nice sculpting work going on there to really kind of like flesh out the environment. We've got this tropic region, and there's just some really nice foliage work going on here that I wanted to highlight. This really characterful kind of tree that we've got over here, some cool bushes and lily pads and things like that. Just lots of really cool stuff going on in general, and some of the small prop work that's being made as well. Really, kind of really nice. Don't even know what fruit that is, but it looks very tasty. So then we've got the Arctic region as well. We have this giant Titan's hand that's kind of been completely frozen. Some really cool stuff going on there. Again, lots of really nice verticality in that design, and some good stuff. The Ikku Temple, mildly terrifying, slightly intimidating, but otherwise, kind of very nice as well. So some good stuff going on there. And have I got any others? I think I do. Last one in the Desert Temple as well. Just this kind of nice kind of ruins that's coming along here. Some really nice kind of small pieces to go in and really kind of like flesh out the space. So you get a really nice kind of sense of scale on some of that stuff as well. So as always, kind of keep up the good work. There's some amazing stuff going on here. And today we're going to be taking a look at some of the other content in there and some of the stuff that's been posted in here and providing some feedback on that content so that you can help make your artwork and final pieces even better. So with that, Javier, I will throw it over to you and we can start looking at some of the content that's been done.
Yeah, of course. Awesome. Yeah. Again, thanks for everyone for tagging myself and Aaron on the feedback channel. I highly encourage, if you're wanting specific feedback, definitely tag us. We're constantly on the Discord, checking every day and just trying to provide as much feedback as possible whenever we get pinged. But I'm going to be looking at a few different areas. We put out a survey yesterday on people who want to get their stuff looked at. So I'm just going to be flying through the map, but also jumping into specific areas. One of them that caught my eye was this really cool mushroom village. I saw it from far away because we have the nice like silhouettes of the mushrooms and the big red tops on these guys. Overall, it looks like there's already been some feedback implemented. Before these were a little bit too white, and now we started moving towards a beige color. So I think that actually helps, ground these up a little better so they're not as eye-catching with the solid, just pure white albedo there. It would be cool to kind of, try to get these a little bit more in unison in terms of like the colors. I think we have, again, I constantly go in and out of albedo mode. I think it helps to overall see a lot of the different colors and how they're working together. That might be something that is kind of forgotten as you're kind of building out these levels and stuff like that. So definitely highly recommend just going into the albedo and seeing where the values are. It's definitely going to help you guys with lighting, especially if some of your albedo ranges are too high or too low. It definitely helps, get that all in sync. So I really like what's going on here in terms of like you have some very subtle yet small little details with these little like porous pockets here in the albedo. Would be cool to kind of integrate some of that stuff into this guy, because I do feel like in terms of quality, we have a lot more variation on the texture surfaces here. We have like even some subtle noise. It looks like there might be even like a subtle gradient coming up from here, which helps ground the asset, as opposed to like we have this really harsh seam here, even just if possible. I know there's been a few instances of real-time virtual texture used throughout the scene, so introducing that into these guys could help blend these and just overall ground them a little bit better. As far as like world building, some things that I think are super successful here, and I think it's happening a lot within the world, is just grounding your assets. We have the larger forms here with just these bigger pieces, but going in and taking some of these smaller pieces, world building them around these larger pieces to help sell and ground the whole differentiation of sizes on stuff. So like I think we're doing a good job here with the mushrooms to kind of get that scale and that readability, but getting some stuff closer into here, trying to hide as much of these like super hard seams as possible is definitely going to help. Another thing, again, talking about like, we have some really nice stuff going on here, but again, it feels like we're missing some of that on these larger surfaces, right? Especially with how small these guys are. It's really nice that we have this subtle breakup on the albedo. Introducing that into here would be really, really awesome. Overall, I think the verticality on here is really cool. We have a lot of these like roaring hills going up and down, and we have a little bit of traversal. Would be kind of interesting to get some more pathing in here. I see some stairs in here. In a few other areas, I've actually seen stone pathings, but could actually help lead the player a little bit in terms of like where to go. Right now it's kind of just we have these little stairs here, but there's no real trail making the player kind of follow that specific path into this area. I do like the variation that we got going on here in as far as the colors, but one thing I feel like these could be a little bit too hot again in terms of just looking at the overall albedo ranges. These are super, super saturated compared to what we just currently have. I think it's cool to have them on the large surfaces just because, they are, the most prominent pieces of this entire like village. But these kind of smaller ones might be getting a little bit too saturated, and my eye is kind of drawing into them a little bit too much. So could just be easy as just lowering the value a little bit, maybe lowering the lightness. And then talking about just value changes, these assets are looking really cool. And I think I really like the modularity of it that you're able to just copy and paste, copy and paste. Getting some more variation in terms of, once again, I'm talking about values because it's just something I kind of work with a lot. But we do see the constant, because it all is the same color, we can definitely see that repetition over and over again. So some quick ideas is probably doing some world offsets in terms of like the colors. Maybe we want to get another version that's a little bit darker, a little bit lighter. Maybe turn these poles a little bit just darker, just get a little bit more variation. Super apparent once we actually go into these guys, it's kind of that, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. I mean, it's nice to, use that stuff, but definitely go in, do some subtle hue changes can also help just add a little bit more variety to the asset, even though you're using the same geometry over and over again.
If
But
you
yeah.
on that as well, we actually have got some of those features already implemented in the base material. So
Mm,
if we switch to my screen just for a second, there's if you open up the base material that we've provided, there is a hue shift range value inside the albedo, which will basically tweak the hue per instance. So if I'll set this up really high just so it's super obvious. But you can kind of see now that each of these individual boards now has a ton of different ones. So obviously be quite subtle with it. You don't need massive ranges to
yep.
get good results, but just a tiny little bit is just going to start giving you a little bit of that variation as well, and it's super cheap to do. So it's already built in. Just get those sliders in. And then one area that I do want to say where this area does succeed quite well is I love, I don't know if this is intentional or not, but the consideration of changes between time of day is really
Mm,
nice. So we've got a new button which Seb has added for us. It's next to the common maps, just at the top here. And if you press that, you'll get a time of day slider. I dock it up at the top here, just above the viewport. So it's really nice to really quickly shift through. And one of the things that's really nice about this is this environment changes so much in feel when it goes from day to night. So you get the kind of the glow of the lamplight, you get the inner glow from the mushrooms coming through, and this kind of like upper glow on this as well here. So you do get some really nice transitional kind of like view of this world from there. So some really nice stuff there. That's definitely worth, kind of celebrating as well.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I really
Thanks for having
yeah, I really like you mentioned, that was going to be something I was going to mention is the variation that you have within the buildings. It's cool that you have some that are actually on, some that are off. So it gives that just nice variation of stuff that's actually happening within. Something that me and Aaron were talking about was like, building out these spaces with interiors in mind. So it's really awesome that you've kind of gone in here and gave us an opportunity to explore some of these. So definitely pushing that would be like something that I think you could push and go forward, like theming these up a little bit. It seems like already we have like, depending on where this is, maybe like a food market, taking the time and go into each separate element and seeing like, hey, how can I make this interior different from the previous one, and trying to find a different theme for it. Maybe you want to like a worksman shop or something like that, but continue that storytelling is going to be super helpful in this area. So great job on that. Cool. Let me see. If no one else has, oh, there was actually one last thing that I was noticing. I think the overall tops of these are cool. There was one texture that I'm like, could use a little bit more variation. It looks like we have this fracture noise. I've seen this kind of noise in Substance Designer when I'm creating textures. Introducing a little bit more variation on this guy would be really cool, so we don't get that crazy like alligator feel to it. Just more variation in terms of larger scale, smaller scale. Because right now we have a consistency of like these smaller little pockets here and there. So definitely pushing that as much as you can. I think is going to definitely go a long way and stuff like that. Cool. But if you guys don't have anything else on this one, I was going to move on to the second
Yeah,
part.
I mean, I completely agree on the tops.
Mhm.
I definitely think, especially in terms of color, they're like, they're a little bit too kind of like aggressive when you compare it to
Yeah.
the rest of the scene.
Hmm.
Um, I definitely think also like you could model some of that information in there as well. So like
Yeah.
the red one with the white spots. There's some good mushroom examples all over the map. It's been quite a popular asset to build for some reason. But it's, kind of like I would go in and actually really kind of model those shapes out a bit more to really accentuate the form and yeah, same critique as Javier had on the
Yeah.
rest of
Yeah. Would be cool to get these like feeling a little bubbly and actual like porous pockets could be interesting. Cool. Yeah, so as I go down this whole route, and this is a little bit what I'm talking as far as like trailing for the player to kind of lead the player. I like this kind of asset here that we had on the ground. So that got me kind of already thinking of like going in this direction. So would be cool to introduce more here in the village, but as I kind of just follow this, I was led into this specific area. So it looks like a bunch of wood trunks, lots of different wood pieces in here, which is really cool. Um, Same kind of idea here, trying to, kind of unionize the overall colors of the browns in the wood. Right now, with the way the lighting is hit it, these are almost getting blown out in a sense because of how like they are. It might little be a little bit of the lighting just being a little too hot there, but toning it down could definitely help. And just again, trying to get these colors matching a little bit better. I really like what you have going on here in terms of like just grounding some of these assets. It looks like we're using the real-time virtual texture here. So this is making it feel super integrated, and we're not getting those like really harsh cutoffs and stuff like that. So really, really awesome there. I love the foliage that you have going on. Something that I tend to do a lot when it comes to foliage and stuff like that is again trying to ground it in some way. Currently, the way it's being implemented, it feels pretty good, but it almost gives that floating effect because there isn't anything behind it, kind of making it feel like, it's growing out of there. So some ideas that I could come up with is possibly painting out like some greenery behind it so it actually feels implemented and it doesn't just feel like it's floating in midair. So definitely something to look at there. One other kind of interesting thing is I do like we have a few different variations of these bushes. Like we have the darker green and we have the lighter green. Trying to integrate a little bit more into that, like if you want to take some of these smaller elements, turning them to the darker green, again, pushing that variation, trying to get a little bit more overall, something interesting to look at as opposed to the same kind of color over and over again. Introducing a few different hue shifts is definitely going to help a bunch. I do really like these guys, and it looks like as a player, I would be able to walk up the ladder here and then jump on these different like mushroom like heads on the side. It would be kind of cool to find ways of integrating them. Oh, and it looks like you've actually already done it. Yeah, so I really like what you're doing here as far as like thinking about, hey, a player could go up here, then jump and thinking about the traversal, thinking about that platform. So definitely pushing that because it's going to give us some nice overall elevation changes when we start playing in here and give us some nice gameplay to work with. Watch out for stuff like this, we're starting to get some floaty bits, even just moving these just slightly down. Definitely, I know it's a little bit difficult with the smaller objects, and depending on where you are looking in the scene, it doesn't hurt to kind of really dive in there and get like a closer look at a kind of almost player level. Sometimes this ends up being missed a lot of the times. If you're constantly working up high like this, you might think like, oh, it's pretty grounded there, but in reality, like once you start playing and getting in there, you'll notice stuff floating a lot of the time. So definitely something to keep an eye out for. Cool. I actually really like some of the detailing that we have on these wood pieces. We have some of the grain and stuff like that. Could be interesting to get a smaller scale grain on these larger pieces, again, to try to unionize that stuff, either through a detail map, or maybe just getting just smaller iteration of these, carving of the wood on the larger pieces, I think could help. And again, make them feel a little bit unionized as well. Um, cool. Let's see what we got here. This is really cool little asset here. It looks like we're using nanite, or looks like we modeled all these bricks, which is also really giving us a lot of nice, I guess, just modeling information and silhouette. The one thing I think that could really benefit from this is, you have a lot of variation within the bricks. And one thing that we kind of look at a lot in, video games is try to break up that sight line and try to break up that harsh, like, just straight line. So even just moving one of these bricks up or down, giving it a little bit of random rotation could add some more variation into these guys. I'm seeing it done here where you're taking like these actual wood pieces and kind of rotating them slightly. So we kind of get like this randomness to it. Would be interesting to get just a little bit random, more random variation onto these guys, especially on, the side silhouette, maybe push and pull a few of them. Try to get a little bit more variation than what you have currently here would be really, really nice. But one thing that I mentioned in the previous at the Mushroom Village is, trying to find trails. And I absolutely love the use of this because it definitely gives me like an opportunity as a player to see like where I can actually traverse to and go to. And it almost leads the player, you have some nice, roundness to the actual trail instead of going just completely in a circle. And I don't know what just happened. I might have just crashed there. Yep, I just crashed. And that's Titan for you.
I've got that area open as well.
I'll try reloading while you're talking about it.
You got a while. But yeah, no, I completely agree with you as well. I think the thing that kind of bugs me about the planks that are up here is that I don't quite get why they would have gone to so much effort to build contextually. Like if the thing's on a hill and it's all running downhill, like there's not really like a chance of flooding, which is why there's so many kind of under here, which I kind of get, right? Because they're trying to create clear walkways, if I can find any. There they are.
Yes,
they
yeah.
fit way more in this space where there's kind of like a very clear like reason and justification for them, whereas over here like it's so much higher up, and it also tends to kind of like restrict you as well. Like if you fall off, you've got to jump back up to there and things like that, which I think that if you put these in, I would maybe have them be less consistent where they are, because at the moment it's like someone has gone in and built out this entire very small town with all of this custom stuff, and it just seems a little bit weird. So I'd maybe go in and break those up as well. While we're reloading as well, might be a good idea for us to have a look at the character, which I think was one of the requests in the art critic feedback as well. So I've put these two side by side because I think they're a really good example of assets that have again been made well, and this is something that we're seeing in the character thread a lot. We're seeing assets that are good but not consistent with the art style. So like a really good way of working is to kind of put these two things side by side. That's why I've kind of asked this person to put their piece up so that we can kind of do a real comparison of it, and just like kind of instinctually, like when you look at it, does it look like they fit within the same universe? Does it look like it fits within the same world? And kind of the kind of style that we're going for, which is kind of this one here, where it's, if you watched the live stream where we had Polygon going through and talking about the different kind of inspiration and kind of like key touchstone points for all of the concepts. It's like chunkiness and a bit cutesy and kind of and things like that. And this has been very well executed on that. Also a good point on the mushrooms as well, with the modeled white tops as well. If it can be done on something this small, it can definitely be done on something that big.
Yep.
But and then when you look at the mouse character, it doesn't have that same kind of principle throughout, right? So again, if you look at the way that the character clothing has been made and compare it, there's some very key differences there. The way that the kind of like where the elements have been have been, kind of built for the character face and the hands and things like that. It gets a little bit, a little bit creepy, a little bit kind of a little bit weird on that side. So I think like in terms of like recreating the Secret of Nim or whatever it was called, I think way back when, it definitely needs to kind of become more in line with this kind of art style in order for it to really feel like it's seated in that world. Because at the moment, these two things are from two look like they're from two very different games.
Aaron, not sure if maybe you agree with this, but thinking about other stylized games where they actually have rodent-like characters, Final Fantasy IX, maybe?
Yeah, yeah, potentially.
Could be.
But I think even there, a little bit maybe too far.
Yeah.
There is another mouse character in the game, I think.
Yeah, I've seen it in the Discord.
It's brought in, and I think that's probably getting a little bit closer to that. It feels like it fits more within that world. I think it's character main. If we do head, yeah. So we've got this one, which is kind of come in here. So again, like if you compare these two heads together, they definitely have a much closer similarity in art style and feel like they fit much more closely. Whereas if you look at this one, there's they're very distinct, very different styles.
I think what helps is the on the two characters on the right is the exaggerated shapes and silhouettes of this guy, while the one on the left goes for a more realistic silhouette. We're exaggerating the ears, the more comical, cartoony stuff, exaggerating the shapes. So definitely something to keep in mind while you're creating the characters and stuff.
Yeah, it can really help to have like so we've posted screenshots and concepts of the character art that Polygon did. It's well worth having that up when you're building and really just kind of like side by siding those two pieces and going, do these two things fit together? Like, do they feel like they're part of the same world? And hopefully that will help with that. Anywhere else you wanted to look at, Javier, while we're going?
Yeah. While I'm loading, one thing just while you're on this specific shot, something to kind of consider, you mentioned like trying to break it up, the wood boards. One thing I'm constantly just looking at is the clipping between the grass and the wood boards. So, that could be a good opportunity of like, hey, it's clipping. Maybe I can just get rid of some boards, break them, just find ways of like get maybe even moving it at all, or maybe you just don't need those sections. So definitely something to keep in mind while you're going through that. The next area that I was looking at was it has like this gigantic spiky back. It's kind of like when you zoom out, it's just another specific area. Let's see. It's kind of nearby, maybe. Let's see. Might be. Oh, there it is right there. Top or at the very, very bottom, you see this kind of like circular. There you go. Right next to the turtle.
Oh,
if you
next
go to the yeah, so right there, that guy. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, so this one was looking really, really awesome. I love the overall shapes and silhouettes. Like it definitely had what was interesting to me was how aggressive the shape was compared to like some of the more kind of cartoony stuff we were getting from the village and stuff like that. So this kind of lends back to what you had mentioned of the main castle where it was almost like death metal-y. And I think it just comes from the more aggressive shapes, the spikiness of it. So I thought it was really cool while I was flying around. It definitely caught my eye. So I kind of wanted to jump in here. The thing in the middle, the house, can we zoom in on that a little bit?
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, so overall, I was just looking at the building and the way it was built with the modular pieces was really, really great. Just more things to keep in mind is just how the pieces are all fitting together. Like, right now you're kind of almost jamming stuff into each other with no way of how it's being built. Some of the things that came to mind is towards the bottom, you'll start noticing the bricks kind of interpenetrating with some of the, like that stuff interpenetrating with some of the actual tree trunk. So definitely, might be a good time to reevaluate some of this stuff. Like depending on how it's being used, maybe you do have to get rid of some, or maybe you just have to make a different variation where you have a shorter wall where you can like, tie this stuff together and you won't get any sort of Z fighting, or maybe you can push those like tree trunks up a little bit so we're not getting any sort of intersecting points and stuff like that. The interior is super, super cool. Really, again, anytime there's an interior, it's really, really awesome because, we're playing with the thought of like what is in this specific space, and it just gives the player a little bit more freedom to explore, which is really, really nice. Again, thinking of
really nice.
yeah, yeah, I love the greenery. It's really awesome coming from the melting pot. Again, just thinking about how stuff is built, like just looking at this shot, I see those wood beams at the top, the two kind of like just straight ones that are actually going into that ceiling, right? But these like curved ones, I wonder if like that would support it just because of how different those shapes and silhouettes are. So definitely something to kind of consider. I really like the smaller details that we have going on with the cobwebs. Like that's really, really awesome. So I'm noticing in a lot of these spaces, we do have a lot of the large shapes, the medium shapes, but we are missing some of the smaller ones. So it's nice, refreshing to see some of the smaller detailing finally coming into these levels. But again, trying to push those smaller assets that'll really give you those finer details once the player's actually in there and stuff like that. So yeah. Really awesome space for this one.
I do love the concept of what they've done here, where they've got like, all of the splaying, but like again, chunky, right? Like
Yeah.
really push it, make it a feature. And don't worry, kind of make sure, like again, we're using nanite with this stuff, so you can use geometry to represent that. And that's absolutely fine as well. I think we actually looked at one of these logs in our nanite video a little while ago. But yeah, and the same as, kind of as Javier said as well, with all of these parts, like anytime you have, kind of mesh intersection, you have an opportunity to exaggerate and then to bring those two things together. So really think about how those two surfaces should match, but then also think about how you can push it a little bit more. So with the shape and silhouette of this, you've got this line here. But if you brought out this brickwork a bit more, you could get an even chunkier line and really kind of push that and exaggerate it. Also, just terrifying.
I would even say like I think they're on the right path with I think you had mentioned talking about roofs, the shingles and stuff like that. Definitely exaggerating those. Like it feels still a little flat. Maybe just exaggerating a few here and there can really help push the silhouette, especially on the edges, like where we're getting the really, really harsh straight line. Taking a single mesh of a single roof tile and then just placing it to try to break up that harsh line could definitely benefit from some of this. So
yeah, anytime you get an edge like this, like just decorate it with the tile and just kind of it can overlap and cover any of the half points that you've got, and that way you've got that geometry still. Same with all of these bottom ones, and it just gives you a nice end piece to work with there. Okay, next area.
cool. Let's see the next area. I think, let me see. I'm not, I'm like back in, but I just want to make sure it's loading okay.
I got a bit more on this one as well. I would say that like with, again, with something, when you start to get to things that are like this big, really think about one, how is the player going to traverse it? Because they've got lots and lots of scope for moving around in the game. So you should expect anything that's kind of this big for them to be able to get on top of it and to be able to move around it. But then also think about the, kind of the space, if you've got this underside here, really would have a lot of a different, kind of things happen to it if you compare it to the top side of this. Same with all these gaps and these crevices. So really think about the shape and how it can change over the surface to give you some more variation.
We're working on some improvements to the grapple as well. Some of the spikes that you have on the right side of the of the rock, those look like points where the grapple would get stuck, right? We are adding a grapple exclusion surface type that is going to help with some of that, so that you can actually exclude some of those elements from actually being viable grapple points.
Also, just on the geometry as well with these trees, really, kind of like these are still looking quite low poly. Really go in and add the subdivisions to make the curve work. You shouldn't really be seeing any kind of like hard edges from like a geometry restriction, because we don't really need to worry about that from a subdivision point of view.
Looks like I'm back, Aaron.
Back in.
And yeah, and I jumped right back into where I want to talk about next.
Perfect.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, the next sort of area I kind of moved away from more of the greenery, like marshlands, and kind of checked out this little space. This was noted in the feedback request, just trying to get some feedback. Seems like it's a little less fleshed out than the rest, which is totally fine. The earlier we can get eyes on it, the more iteration we could go through them. I think for this one, the main thing is, once again, exaggerating some of the shapes could be kind of interesting to get a little bit more curve on this, or just, push some of these like larger shapes a little bit more whimsical and stuff like that. One thing I am noticing with the texture is it's feeling a little bit flat. I feel like there's two things we could definitely work on. Right now, the texture itself, I feel like I'm losing the overall shapes of the bricks because they're kind of pushed in so close together, and some are even overlapping. Definitely trying to go back to it in terms of adding a little bit of grout, so we could definitely see the changes of the different bricks, and seeing if there's any way to break that up a little bit. Again, one other thing to kind of consider is, how is this going to look when it's tiled? And we can definitely see it here that we're getting a lot of repetition. So trying to break that up, there's a couple things that come to mind, is either, making a second variation, maybe possibly doing some vertex painting, some masking to get a little bit of variation. Some other things that keep in mind is, when you're working on a texture, it's very similar to the value stuff that I was talking about with the other like play areas. Pushing some of the lighters and darkers could definitely almost give some variation, but if it's pushed too far, it could definitely affect you negatively. And in terms of this, I think the white blocks are a little bit too hot compared to some of these darker areas in the green, which is making it stand out, but then it makes it easier to see that repetition over and over and over again. So if there's any way to kind of bring the greenery up to these white, so we get them more in line, or even pushing the white areas of this texture down to the green, it's just going to help blend it and kind of put it all together. And then if you did want some variation, that's where you would take, any sort of vertex painting or any sort of masking and stuff like that, world space, to kind of introduce that variation. Another thing to mention is, we've seen it being done across the map everywhere, is using the displacement, using the nanite to try to push these forms again. Right now, we have this brick wall that's super flat. Once we add that nanite stuff, it'll definitely help push out and stuff like that. The one caveat to that, with the way it's being currently authored, is, again, I think by having the grout implemented into the texture, it's just going to help nanite kind of have some areas to push versus pull. So right now, because of how they're overlaying the bricks, it could all be pushed in one direction, and it might look not the greatest. So definitely an opportunity to play around with it and see where you can take it from here. Other things to kind of mention is the resolution on some of the stuff. Like, when putting assets next to one another, we're getting some super, super high resolution on this guy versus some of the low stuff on this guy. Couple things that we can mess with is integrating a little bit more detail onto this guy, maybe adding a detail albedo map or something, maybe a normal map, and just trying to unify these a little bit better. I mentioned it in the previous areas, is we have these larger shapes kind of being added into these even larger shapes, right? But we're missing the smaller details, like maybe some smaller pieces of rubble, maybe some, just broken up bits. Maybe we can even take some of these tiles, actually model them, UV them, and then just lay them out here like they're kind of falling off and stuff like that. But again, we are starting to experiment with some of the trails, which is really nice. We're using these guys, but the variation, they do feel a little bit too big, I would say. Like if a player was here, it'd like be jumping like from tile to tile, maybe just making another variation of smaller kind of padding and stuff like that can definitely help. I really like what we have going on here. Like this feels pretty right. Maybe there's an opportunity of kind of using both these meshes. Maybe you want to add some of these smaller stairs down here. Again, trying to push that variation as much as possible. But definitely looking forward to where this is getting pushed to next. I know this is kind of an area that maybe late to the party in terms of like getting this in. So interested to see where it goes next. Not sure if you have anything, Aaron.
I would say just make sure you're considering your interiors. Like this is something again, like we are seeing just over and over again. I did some critique videos this week, and I think I said your interior is too small like 30 times. So if you go inside, right, and then there's like a spiral staircase in there.
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice this.
Spiral staircases are like they're a little bit of a pain from like character navigation standpoint. So you've got to be really careful with them, and you need to make sure that if you you make something with an interior, then that interior has a spiral staircase. You need to make sure you've got enough room for that spiral staircase so that the character can get up it easily. At the moment, it's really thin and really narrow. So the player is just so likely to fall off it that it's insane. And then also the placement of it as well, like where, kind of where's the entry point for it, and like where would you traditionally be putting that? It's probably not going to be right in the center, completely standalone, right? It's probably going to wrap around the entirety. So just think about that as well. Like when you have your interior, you really need to consider the whole playable space that you're creating with that and how the player is going to navigate it.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this hole is even big enough for a player to kind of go through. It looks like if I was on this step, it might just hit my head on the roof. So
yeah. And if you've got like a grapple hook as well, which we do in the game, like is there enough room for the character to grapple through that point and not get stuck or caught on anything? And that's just going to create an annoyance for them. So
I was about to say that too. Do you even need a spiral staircase to get to the second floor? Because between the grapple, you can add jumping puzzles and you can have the wind gust volume. There's ways to get there that don't necessarily involve using all that space on spiral staircase,
Yep. But you probably expect it to be there, right? Anyway,
yeah, it could just be an accent piece, maybe like towards the bottom it's like blocked off, so maybe they don't expect you to actually use it. Maybe it's like crumpled towards the bottom, so could be a good way of like having it there, but like giving the impression like it's not meant to be like used and stuff like that. So yeah. Cool. Yeah, so let's kind of just keep wandering around here. Let's see if there's any. I saw this from far away, which looked pretty dope. Let's see. So again, going back to that specific castle, talking about repetition, this is definitely something that even from far away, we're seeing that. I think like zooming in on it, the texture is like it's really nice. I might even say that we might have to go back and create a variation that has way more variation in the actual texture itself to kind of get a little bit more breakup, because we are starting to see some of the colors repeated, some of the shapes repeated. So maybe there's an opportunity of making a larger size texture with more bricks in it as opposed to like just a fewer in here. Some other things to really push the overall shaping of this stuff is, again, I'm kind of going back to values over and over again. Something we do in terms of like if a building is made up of like the same material, like brick, for as this example, even just hue shifting or value shifting some of the secondary elements can help ground some of these pieces, so we can distinctly see where a wall piece is versus a column piece, right? You know, it's good that you're trying to use the same texture over and over again, but even just a subtle value change will help break up the overall complexity of the building a bit more and stuff like that. So definitely keep that in mind. Some other things that could definitely help is, once again, vertex painting, get a little bit more variation with colors. And I think it could be interesting to, again, try to nanite some of this stuff, maybe get a little bit more silhouette breakup because we are getting a lot of flat areas and stuff like that. One thing that I feel like when it comes to stuff like this that we are missing is overall how we are trimming out the space. And when I mean trimming, it's more of UVs, right? So like what I can imagine is maybe this brick doesn't go all the way to this hard edge, right? Maybe we have another sort of smaller texture. Maybe we take even these like smaller textures and just trim the edge around to have some sort of breakup between this wall piece and also this little curb piece, right? It looks like you're doing, I can't tell. Like we're getting some of it, and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but what's really cool here is we have this like darker like little area here as opposed to this wider area. So it almost looks like towards the bottom we have a nice little trim that's a little bit darker, but that's kind of the thing that I'm looking for in terms of like, you know, trimming out a lot of these spaces. It could just be as easy as taking this piece here and just moving it around these edges and just like getting a little bit more variation into there. It's also a nice way to inexpensively like have any sort of like patterns that you want the player to follow. Like maybe right now the UVs are kind of all just angled this way. We could add some cuts onto this floor piece and actually, you know, rotate the tiles to where you want the direction of the player to go. So I could easily see taking the mesh, adding a few edge loops here, and then just kind of laying down these tiles to go inside of this interior. Speaking of interiors, I really like the overall lighting that we're getting in here and the overall space. This feels pretty grandiose and epic, which is really nice for something as big as this guy. So definitely really nice that you've gone ahead and kind of modeled the interior here. So kudos to that. And yeah, just kind of going through this whole little area. So this is actually, so it looks like you're doing some of it in here. So this trimming is super, super nice. So this is kind of the same concept that I'd be interested to see more outside in a little bit of these spaces. You know, maybe we want to take some of that pattern and maybe we just want to like trim out the whole different area and stuff like that. Could be really interesting. And I think it would tie everything together. Like these pieces are really, really nice. So it seems like we do have a texture that has a lot of trimming on it. So definitely utilizing this sort of texture around the whole interior could be super, super beneficial. And seeing ways of like breaking the monotony of the texture over and over again could be really awesome. Yeah. Anything from you, Aaron?
No, I think you covered it all really well.
Nice. Dope. Okay, cool. Let's see. Wasn't sure if there was any other spots you wanted me to jump in or if you wanted to drive for a second.
Oh, we've got loads of spots
Okay.
that we can talk about. I think so one of the ones that I think is worth covering, I want to talk about turtles or
Oh
tortoise.
yes. Yeah. We were just on that earlier.
We've actually got two in there.
Let's see.
So there's one on the left near the marshlands, and then one.
Ah,
on
there it is. There it is.
You know.
Yes.
Um,
I remember giving a little bit of feedback on the Discord regarding this one, and it looks like it's actually been implemented. So that's really nice. But
yeah, so I think with these kinds of assets, you know, they're really difficult because they're so big. They struggle with it, and I think the main reason for that is because they are still thinking about this as just an asset, a single asset that they're placing in the scene, just like if it was like a tree or a rock or a shrub or or another mushroom that they've got in there. And actually, once you get to assets of this size, and this is really big, you really need to start thinking about it from a level point of view, and start thinking about how you can construct it from lots and lots of pieces rather than just one. So when we kind of like look at this particular asset, it's, again, when if you throw a character on top of there just to kind of show it as a size reference, it's significant.
Yeah, it's definitely super big. Again, I think it stems from maybe people are like working from so high up, not really going into like that player view like you're mentioning. So definitely like, see where the pitfalls are and seeing if there's any way to, I guess, even build it smartly, having this gigantic piece as opposed to having these smaller like almost pieces could help again with modularity. If you just wanted to copy paste and even extend this right now, could be a little bit more interesting to break it up that way.
And I think about it, think about it as a level, right? Like, how's the player going to navigate it? What are they
Mhm.
going to see? Like, because at the point where it's just like this one massive kind of curved dome, there's really not a lot of player interest for traversing across it, which is a real shame because when you create points like this, from a distance, they look really, really
Yeah.
interesting, right? Because it looks so different to the rest of the environment that they can see. So when you fly, when you're looking from, like, say, the Arctic region or something like that, and you go in, you spot that, you spot
Yep.
that thing from afar, and you're like, ooh, what is that? And it makes you want to go and see it. And then if you get to it, and all you have is just, kind of like these big, flat, empty, kind of spots and ridges, and there's nothing else there, and there's nothing for you to see or do, then it's a big disappointment for the player when they get there and there's no reward and there's nothing of any real interest to go and see. But if you were looking at this from, like, I think this is probably a good point. Let's go. Just going to throw on my character reference just so we can really see the size difference of this thing. So I'll throw on my character. So that's my character reference there, right? So that's how big this thing is, and if we just pull out a little bit more, you can really see it. That's my character right there. If you were building anything that was of this scale, you'd never do it with a single asset, and you certainly wouldn't want to have this lower resolution level of information. If we look at if at any other point, let's have a look at this. This one's quite a good example. If you look at the amount of like stuff and variation that is in this space for the player to navigate and look around, and all of the different assets that have come together to construct this piece, and then you compare it to the other one, then you really start to see that kind of like that break of information. So really think about this as a level, right? Like, think about this, like, what is this ridge that you've got in here? How is the player going to explore it? Like, is it going to form a path? Where is that path going? Kind of all of those different things. So I think this type of asset is fine to throw in as a block out for you to really start to feel out that space. But from a from a level design point of view, that's really how you need to start kind of thinking about it. And then when there's two of them, it starts to get even more complicated as well, right? Because we've had two people who've come up with, a similar idea, which happens all the time. And they've created it, and they've got basically the exact same problem, right? It's the low level of information because it's this massive asset that they've brought in, and it just doesn't really, kind of work at that scale. But at the point where there's two of them, really that's not enough. Like, again, these things kind of act as as like a point of interest. So really, if you're going to have like shells in the world, then at that point we probably need to have like 4 or 5 of them that are kind of like in lots of different areas and regions, and they need to have some kind of commonality between them all that makes them like interestingly explorable places, but have like a cohesive thread. So I think if we're going to have more than one turtle shell in there, then really we need to have like 4, or potentially even more, and they need to have like a common design space. So is there an interior, like, it's that interior got kind of like a shared theme, and then the exterior's got something a little bit more distinct to it, and that way it's going to kind of create a much more interesting space to to go and explore in the world, and it makes the whole world cohesive, right? Because that's the whole thing we're trying to do here is make sure we're creating a cohesive world.
Maybe something that could work there is they're already gentle curved surfaces. So that is perfect for something like walk sliding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe that's one of the design aspects that you can use it to flesh out the space because you're already having a pretty good blockout to turn it into a good walk sliding course.
Yeah.
Maybe even if you upturn it and then you have a skate bowl.
I think it might be. Let's have a look at this one as well. Javier, this one got posted as a request in the thread, so it might be worth having a look.
Let me see. Let me see if I can fly to it. Where is that?
Near the starter island with the large bridge. And we should look at the bridge next as well. I think.
Let me see. Man, I'm still trying to get used to mushroom. Oh, starter island. Oh, I see it. Okay. All right. If you can swap over to me, that'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Try not to go too fast here. Yeah, this one's really awesome. It's got a lot of super nice detail in here. Yeah, what's really nice about what we have going on here is, like you were mentioning, Aaron, it has a lot of different pieces, and I think that overall helps the I think it overall helps the scalability in terms of like if I wanted to extend this, it'll be super quick to, take a wall mesh, take one of these like wood pieces and kind of just push it and just, extend it out wherever I need to. As opposed to something we were talking about earlier, the turtle shell, it almost feels like it was built for just that one specific instance, and there's no real modularity of like how if I wanted to, or if someone took that piece, could I extend it? How could I make it bigger? How could I make it smaller? So definitely, thinking about ways of taking your assets and again kitting them out as opposed to having like these larger sections, like trying to break them up almost like Lego blocks that would help you or any other artist make certain things that they want within their levels. So this is really, really a nice example because, I can see a lot of the reusability that we're seeing here. Like, again, I'm assuming these are all separate meshes that we can extend these guys. So super, super awesome there. This is really, really nice. I love this like silhouette breakup, and this is just a separate mesh. And we do a lot of this all the time in terms of like taking a skirt mesh and just putting it right on the edge where we want that silhouette breakup on those specific corners, which is really, really awesome. Some things I can see that would be super beneficial is, I mean, we've mentioned it before, is naniting some of these roof tiles. I think will bring a lot of like overall shape and silhouette breakup to this. Some things that are super successful is we're talking about the exaggerating shapes and making a little bit more whimsical, even though it's like super, super subtle. Like we're just getting a lot more variation with this. Like instead of having this a straight line, we went in and kind of like whoever made this kind of just added a little bit of curvature here, and I looks like I might have crashed again. Hold on. Okay.
We can switch back to mine. I've got it.
Okay. Yeah.
My screen as well.
One thing that I wanted to mention on that specific house is very similar to the Mushroom Village in terms of like I really like the emissive addition to it, so it makes it feel like there's an interior there, right? One thing that could help is variation, and this more comes in terms with the emissive. So maybe you want some rooms that have the light brighter, maybe you want them like a little bit dimmer and stuff like that. Right now, because it is all the same intensity, it feels a little strange. Like, are all the rooms turned on? Are all the rooms at like full blast on like lighting? So maybe the one on the attic can be a little bit dimmer. Maybe some of the rooms like can be a little bit, less bright or something like that. So
Also,
definitely.
it's also like surface of the sun levels by like if
Yeah,
you switch to
absolutely.
nighttime, it's like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's a lot of candles
Oh man,
in that
yeah. It's almost
house.
like, is it on fire inside or what's
Yeah.
going on there?
Yeah.
But yeah. So definitely introducing a little bit more variation. I know I've been mentioning variation in terms of color, but it comes in terms of like emissive levels, roughness levels, all that stuff. So definitely something to kind of consider with that stuff. I really like some stuff that I think is really awesome is we have a lot of these like man-made, almost aggressive, like solid shapes, but then we have the nice netting on the left side, which is really, really awesome. I think it helps bring a little bit softness to the overall silhouette of the building by introducing these like curved pieces and these like almost drapery stuff like that. So definitely consider, ways of introducing a little bit more silhouette breakup to your buildings and stuff like that. And this is just like a secondary piece that is really, really awesome. So
Love this
um,
as well.
yeah. That's really, really nice. All the roping and stuff like that. So one thing that all these elements are feeling for me is secondary elements as opposed to like the larger, overall building. Introducing some of these smaller assets like we were talking about early on in the like Mushroom Village. We have the large pieces, but trying to introduce some of the smaller detailing pieces is really gonna help push your specific section to a more finalized look. We've worked on these like larger areas, we've kind of built out the main structure, the bones of it, try to go in and start detailing it with these smaller assets that'll be seen at a smaller like player view. So definitely
Also,
definitely
like
something to consider.
the thing that I love about this as well, like as well as the added form, is that it just gives the building immediate knowable purpose. Like
Hmm.
you see it and you're like, oh, okay, like I get the purpose of that building like immediately, which is really nice.
Yeah,
As well.
it's definitely tying into the whole storytelling and theming of it. It's like, hey, it's like a fishing dock, so it would be
Yeah.
it's
I think
awesome.
I've got a few points from my point of view as well. I think it's so this is really good. But again, like it's not chunky enough. Like it's not got like that thickness to it that kind of we're definitely going for on the style. So I would say kind of like these elements here, they're great. Like they're brilliant because they break up the silhouette and they break up the shape. But I would go in and I would make them thicker, make them chunkier. And then also the thing that I think is a bit of a missed opportunity, you've edged the rooftop, which is a shame because actually, if you imagine you'd again, we did this earlier with the previous tile proof, but if you carried these tiles through to individually modeled elements, you'd have a much more interesting silhouette than this very straight line that you've now put in instead. So actually, I think it would be worth getting rid of some of this edge paneling and thinking about it more from the underside of that. And then using those tiles as a way of really kind of like exaggerating that edge as well on the smaller element. So same with like the netting as well. It's very, very kind of like thin and very, I would just go in and chunk all of this stuff up. And then again, don't be afraid to use geometry where you need it. Kind of like this is quite a good example. You've got this cut hole and these cut elements here. We're at a point now where you do not need to be conservative with that kind of geometry. If a surface is curved and smooth, then it should be curved and smooth in the mesh representation. So I would go in and I would just subdivide that until it's at the roundness that it would need to be for that surface. So same with kind of like this edge here and this edge here. You can go in, you can add, you can go in and add a lot more for that surface. Same with this stuff as well. Like again, like get this to match with the brickwork that's been laid, because at the moment it's really nice because it does add to that silhouette and that shape. But when you put it in here, it becomes immediately obvious when you look at it that this is just a mesh that's been kind of like just set on top of it, rather than something that's really actually become part of the kind of part of the brickwork. Right. That's it.
No, yeah, yeah. All great stuff. I feel like with this one, it's more or less like just going through the map. We're starting to get a really nice roughness breakup, especially on when we're looking at it like at a high angle on the roof. We start getting a little bit of that roughness variation, which I feel like that like those hot spots when you're kind of like that is really, really awesome, which I feel like I haven't been seeing a lot of that in the map. So definitely something to kind of consider, the roughness is just as important as all your other maps, trying to get a little bit of variation because we are going to start running into instances like this where we're kind of going through these specific areas and stuff like this really, really helps like amplify your overall material and gives it some more like uniqueness to it. So definitely, put the time and effort into your roughness maps just as much as you're doing into the other color and stuff like that within the levels and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. And break up those straight lines.
mhm. Yeah,
Whenever you see a
absolutely.
straight line, like again, like if you think about we're aiming for kind of like pre-industrial, and if you've ever seen an old building, there's not a straight line in in the place, right?
Yeah.
Like it's because they didn't have the tools or the capacity to make sure everything was straight, and also they just didn't care. So as long as it was load bearing, it wasn't likely to crush and kill everyone inside it. They were happy. So anytime you've got like a straight line like this, just go in and break it up. Sculpt a little
Mhm.
bit of edge detail in there, give it a little bit of, just a little bit of shape and an adjustment, and you'll end up with a really cool piece. But otherwise, this is a really nice asset, and lots of reusability as well, as you
Yeah.
said, which
Yeah.
is really good. Right. Let's take a look at this one. Now, this one, I think I've seen this in lots of various stages. I think they've got a bit of vertex color view
I
on their
see.
asset at the
Okay.
moment, so they can see it. So I think you can trust that the hot pink edge trim on the bridge. I don't think is a permanent fixture, but it's worth having a look.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'll just do a little
Yeah.
flat
Oh,
so you can see.
yeah. So one thing that I'm starting to like is especially the areas of broken like debris and stuff like that. Whoever is making this is doing that stuff that you were mentioning, right? Like it has that edge lip as the mesh to break up the silhouette, but it looks like it's actually matching that. So we get a
Really,
better rep.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
really
super, super
clean
nice
work.
here. Yeah, yeah, super, super nice here. And it just feels like it's just part of one single mesh. So this is kind of the treatment that we were talking about at the fishing little house there earlier. So this is really, really nice here. But yeah, continuing to amplify this in any way possible would be really, really awesome. Like maybe breaking some of these guys up. So right now, like a lot of them are kind of just so even just staying here, a lot of them are kind of looks like we're just missing the solid bricks on a lot of these like different layers, but right here in the center we have one that's kind of broken up and chunked up, so maybe introducing a few more of those broken up pieces within it so it doesn't feel like, hey, as opposed to like it feels like we're just removing bricks, it feels like some are actually being broken off and stuff like that, and it looks like they're kind of being implemented every couple of layers and stuff like that, but definitely on the more, I guess, like broken up areas, I would assume more of those chunked up pieces as opposed to like it feeling like they're just removing some. Some other things to kind of consider is right now, another thing that we can definitely exaggerate is subtle rotation, subtle like, movement. Because right now, even though it is broken up, if I were to look at it straight on, it's all very, very just on a single plane. So maybe you want to rotate a few of these so it feels like they're starting to kind of fall off, or maybe, starting to chip away and stuff like that. So definitely kind of continue to push that as much as you can. And again, trying to break up that silhouette. Um, some other things to kind of consider is like more variation on this guy. Again, it's really nice that we're using one tiling texture, but are there ways to kind of push this? Maybe another variation of like wherever they're starting to break up some of the brick, maybe we want to have a variation that has more cracks, more debris, more crumpled up. Maybe some adding some decal leaks because the surface is like so big, just introducing any sort of way to break that up a little bit.
Yeah, I completely
But
agree
yeah.
on that. I think the texture also is just it's really, really noisy.
Mhm.
And again, like kind of taking out some of that and kind of, again mixing it in with another texture is going to really help. Kind of like break that up and sell it a bit more. Because when you get to kind of like here, it's just very obvious
Yeah.
like one color. There's a little bit of like a noticeable line here where
Hmm.
it's kind of like you can see the visible tiling, and it just kind of loses it a little bit. Kind of at that scale, and then also start thinking about things like like waterline on
Mm.
this and things like that, where you really effectively use kind of where the asset sits to change stuff up, like going in and creating like a fixed line height for the water line, and then just breaking that up a little bit in shader is really easy to do and is worth doing. Same with like kind of like underside and things like that. But then also kind of like let these things, something that we see a lot of the time when people are making like man-made structures is they never let nature take any of it back over in any way. And actually for like a bridge like this, it would be really heavily overgrown and there'd be moss and lichen and kind of like all of the stuff where it's nature's going to slowly creep back into this surface. It'd be really good to start kind of like seeing that in there, and then really again trying to match the art style and match the feel and get that like chunkiness and that real feel in there. This is looking a little bit it's looking a little bit Dark Souls, I would say, at the moment, right? So you really want to go in there and think
I
about that
also,
one.
yeah, I also feel like with the scale of this, like in reality, like are they gonna make this bridge with such tiny bricks? Like I'm assuming
Mhm.
like let's get like some larger bricks, which also helps with the overall just silhouette and also that art style, just more, I guess, bigger and exaggerated shape. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
these bricks are almost kind of like at that kind of almost decorative
Yeah,
um
yeah, yeah.
uh size. So yeah, I think definitely um kind of break it up. And I do like the way that they've got, kind of like again, there's nice variation across this though as you're running through it, which is good. So I think what that's kind of definitely an area where this really succeeds is that they've got the bridge, but they're not just making it one straight bridge that you have to
Hmm.
run across for like 6 or 7 minutes to get across this thing. Um, they're creating a lot of points. I would maybe go in and add some higher points across here though, just because like you'll get some much better kind of grapple fun as you're kind of like moving through it. Like at the moment, there's not many points that you can grapple to kind of increase your speed across this distance. So well worth kind of going in there.
Yeah, it
Um,
might be. I mean, they already have that it looks like that crane, maybe copying it a few more times around, like that could be like an easy win-win there for more grapple
yeah,
opportunities.
yeah, or increasing the height of these, these
Yeah, yeah,
columns a little bit,
yeah.
just to give it a bit more dramatic, of a dramatic feel to it. Right, we've got 10 minutes left. Are there any other points you'd like to have a look at?
Um, let me see. I finally I'm kind of running around. I mean, if you want to just jump into one, and then we can just kind of go from there. I don't know if there's anything on the Discord or in the chat
Oh, yeah,
that.
let's double check our Discord. In fact, I think now is probably a good time to answer some questions that we've had popping up. So these are from the Discord. So we'll run through a couple of them. Could we get a blueprint for NPC characters? So a little bit off topic, but we've actually I'll cover it because it's going to be very easy to answer. We've made a blueprint already that you can add in. So this is just a temporary marker on the scene. If you go to blueprint, there's an NPC temp marker. You can add that to the world. And what's nice about that is that it doesn't spawn the skeletal mesh in. So when we've got a lot of the world loaded in, we're not going to be paying the cost of that skeletal mesh being loaded into memory, or being actually having to draw it. So if you want to add a skeletal mesh, you should do it this way. Pick whichever one you want. We've also got animations that you can set for it to play. And then when you play the game, that skeleton will appear at that point in the world. So that's a nice easy way of doing it. Had a question on PCG. If you clear the link on the PCG, do you get any benefit to it, or the same benefit of PCG loading? So there's no difference. Basically, when you clear the PCG link, you're basically just converting those instant static meshes that you've created, and you just put them in a separate actor that doesn't have the link to the PCG actor. So they're both the same in terms of it. You just lose the ability to be able to regenerate that content once you've done it. See if there's any ones that are a bit more critique focused. We've actually had a question on stone wall blending in there as well. In the first week, Aaron demoed a painted stone wall blend. Could we get the material demos as well in the upcoming weeks? They're already in the project inside the base content folder. There is some demo level and demo materials that show how you can go about setting that up. So if you go to environment, global, materials, and examples, there's a bunch of content in there where I show you how you can go about blending two different materials together, or potentially more. We look at that stone that was on that castle wall, which is kind of like quite a nice example. And then we mix it in with kind of like a plaster kind of scree layer that could be mixed on top to really break it up. So again, the stuff that Javier is talking about there with the castle and with some of the other areas is really nice. But again, like, just think about the way that material has been made and the layers that will have been put on top of it, both from kind of like a man-made point of view, like how will they have treated the stone, how will they have covered it, and how will that have broken away over time. But they're also the kind of the organic kind of nature of things as well. Streaking, as Javier said again, like as this stuff is out in the elements, right? It's going to get rained on, it's going to get pooped on, it's going to have lots of things growing on it, stuff like that. So really consider all of those things, when you're building out these materials. Zooms. Okay. I can throw this one to Javier and see how he does with it. Question: speaking from the perspective of a noob, this looks really amazing. What is the correct balance of speed versus quality? What a broad
Oh man,
on that one.
Yeah. So that's a great question. Speed versus quality. So it's the way I kind of look at it is in like a regular production. A lot of the times we have different phases of a project where it's like alpha, beta, gold and stuff like that. So I almost want to say, like, think of it in terms of different phases, right? For me personally, getting the larger picture, getting the block in, like, first and foremost, to get the sense of like the scale, make sure it feels good. Like, it doesn't necessarily have to look pretty, but we do get a sense of some of the other aspects that Aaron's been talking about, where as far as like traversal, how it feels at the player level and stuff like that. So making sure that all feels great before moving forward, almost into the art phase, can really, really help make your art 10 times better in terms of, like, once you have all that feeling really good, maybe we have the scale feeling really great. It's just going to come second nature when you start arting it up. So I would even say, like, definitely spending the time, and there could be opportunities of, like, maybe you block out something in one area, kind of move on to something else, and then come back to it and see how it feels, get it, maybe come back to it at a different time, because you'll always end up feeling like, when you haven't been to it in a while, maybe you'll start seeing things that you wouldn't necessarily the first time. So definitely, moving around the level and trying to get like larger areas and broader strokes, I would say, is definitely something to take into consideration, as opposed to kind of like noodling in one specific area the whole time. Broader strokes is going to be super important with like something as large scale as this. So definitely something to consider. But hopefully that answers your question.
I completely agree. Yeah. I love it as well. It's like, at the start, speed.
Yeah.
Towards the end, quality.
Yeah.
But
and
no,
I think
it's completely right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is getting there. Like, we upon it. Like, a lot of these areas are starting to kind of fully come into fruition. You know, we have a lot of the bones there. We have a lot of the large scale stuff, but now it's going into it and detailing some of these stuff with the medium and smaller shapes, the storytelling elements to this. So definitely always consider that as you're going through your spaces. And again, it could be a phase. It could be like one of those instances of like I'm working on the large scale stuff, making sure that all feels good before like detailing it. It might be a little bit difficult if like you throw in a building and you're starting to throw in these smaller details when you're not really sure how everything's gonna feel with the medium details. So again, like work big to small and just kind of think of it as like these smaller phases you're going through.
Yeah, I would say as well, like the giving yourself time to iterate on this stuff is really key as well. And that's why speed is important at the start, right? Getting something in, getting it tested, and then start iterating on it. A lot of the time, that's where the quality comes from, right? Is being quick enough with how you're building the content and going through and giving yourself enough time that you can actually make changes, make improvements, delete a load of stuff, you know, and kind of go in and redo it. All of those elements are a speed factor that gives you quality at the end as well. So yeah, those two things are quite linked. We've had a request to check out the mega tree in the tropics, and boy, is it a mega tree because it takes mega performance to
Oh
navigate
man.
around it at the moment. But it is really cool. So we'll, you know, we've got to make sure that this thing makes it through. It's expanded out over the week, so we kind of have got this, you
Nice.
know, kind of entrance area over here. You know, I'll do a little bit of a slow move around so we can see it. I've got some nice kind of like finished up assets here. These lovely kind of root pieces that have come
Nice.
through. All of these buildings, this is just an
Really
absolutely
like really like the
spectacle.
silhouette on the roofs of the buildings.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
And just staggering, you know, scale. It's got that real sense of impressiveness, right? When you come
Hmm.
up to it and then you look up and you're like, you know, it's just it's really cool.
It's
It's, you know,
grand.
really sprawling. Um, the thing I love about this as well is that they've really thought about the design. So, you know, you kind of go in, you've got these interior spaces, there's this
Yeah,
linked up.
definitely thinking about the traversal there, how to like hop onto those mushroom tops and stuff. Oh, and th this stuff is perfect. This is what I was talking about in the other. It could be really cool to get some of that like bubbly on the tops.
Mhm.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, and the color as well is quite nice and
Yeah, the it's really nice the gradation that they have on the tops where it's like red and it kind of goes to like a maroon to like an orange on the edges. The getting some of that variation is really awesome. Makes it more unique and interesting to look at for sure.
and where this works as well, like that red, whereas here, like it's clearly being used as kind of like an indicator to where you're supposed to
Mhm.
traverse. Whereas with the other one, it really like really draws your eye, but in kind of like an unnecessary way because it doesn't have like a traversal purpose for the player. So whereas with this stuff, it's, you know, you can really see the path.
Mhm.
With the other one, it was kind of doing it in an unnecessary way. And then we
Yeah.
make our way up to the tree here, and we've got, you know, kind of all of this.
I'd be interested actually playing this because some of the mushrooms I almost feel like when I towards the top there, like which direction am I gonna go into or like which way should I go so I don't fall completely all the way down
Are
once we
you
start getting
have you
into
loaded up Titan Main? Because I'll
N-
press play and try and see what happens.
yeah, I'm interested to see you playing and see can you actually traverse to the top from the bottom like that's also
I think you can. Well, I mean, we've got like I said, we've got some fairly. Oh no, I've got the player start in there, so it's um, we just get rid of that, and then we can head back on over and give it another go. Uh, just on performance, if any of you are wondering why it's not great, we have the entire map loaded
Oh
into memory
yes. Yeah.
while we're doing this, which is why the performance is not as good as it otherwise would be. As you can see, once you start playing the actual game, we don't have to load in all of that stuff anymore, so we can fall back to
Yeah.
our HLODs. So we could start playing. We've also I've got this character in at the moment, which is we're starting to see some of the characters coming through and are now playable, which is really awesome. So, oh no, there's no collision on it. Okay, hold on. Collision is a little bit random. So we've got these village, like nice little village area. This is quite cool. We can make our way over to the tree. How long have we got on the stream? We got slightly on time. We'll see how much we can do. So we've got these nice areas. Again, these are nice. Like I like the little streaks of like paint on them as well, just to kind of like break up the color a little bit on there. But I don't think I can get through this area. I think they've
blocked it off.
Yeah, I think they've put a box. My guess is they put a box collide on this, and
gotcha.
It's not that good. But I can cheat a little bit if we just. Let's just. Not gonna. We didn't like it. Okay, I'm in. Okay, so we've got this area here. Performance is not great in this space. And it's kind of hard to see. Just gonna see if I can just whoop up to the top.
Nice. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the area I was concerned about. I was like, can I actually turn around?
They are.
Or can I make that jump?
I'm gonna see if I can recover it.
Takes a little platform.
Yeah, there's some mean collision. There's some slightly mean collision in there.
Nice.
But it's
cool.
I would say.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
Although I missed it. Yeah, I can just about. It's tough.
Okay.
It's tough, but it's doable.
Yeah. So definitely important to play these specific areas and see if there's ways of like getting to where you need it to be, or even for the live stream, if you want to get some feedback, making sure like, hey, can they actually play this and traverse through it?
Yeah, we see it happen all the time as well when kind of we go to explore an area and it looks like it's clearly been like it's supposed to be this playable, explorable place by the character. And then we go to play it and there's just one massive box collide on the entire thing.
Yeah.
And it becomes really obvious from that second that it's like, well, they probably haven't ever actually played through that space, right? They've gone in and they've modeled it in another tool and they've imported it in and then that's it. And you just can't build a space like that. You have to play it. You have to go in. So even if you have to do the, kind of the evil, complex collision, for the block out when you're first starting out, that's better than not testing it at all. So really go in and test that stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the space is looking really nice. We've got something for you to look at here. I think I've got a bit of a finished
nice
a finished piece.
I think I might have mentioned that in the Discord. So once again, I think it's all the elements are looking really awesome. Like and I think this is a really great example of what you've been kind of calling out, Aaron, is like the chunkiness. A lot of these feel super nice and chunky, exaggerated shapes and whatnot. But trying to break up some of the pieces with value changes, right? Like a lot of the wood is all feeling exactly the same. So maybe some of these, like maybe the pieces on the corners can be either a lighter wood or maybe a darker wood, trying to push that exaggeration a little bit so we get a differentiation in some of these pieces that you have within this building, right? It doesn't have to be like insane, but just even a subtle shift change in as far as value can definitely help break up the pieces a little bit more. So but overall, great piece on this one.
Can you change, before you move on, can you change the time of day to the evening? Because there's probably something that they should be considering.
I think we are in evening.
It's a bit more towards the right.
Oh,
yep. Yeah, got it. So I didn't notice any light sources while you were doing the playthrough, right? You got the bioluminescent mushrooms, right? But the the buildings, the structures, they don't actually have light sources. So maybe that is something to also consider on this, right? How are people going to navigate this space at night?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I would say as well, like the one thing I noticed is like with the tree, you've got these really massive shapes. So it's kind of like you've taken the tree and then you've just scaled it. And you can do that to some extent, right? And you probably need to just for performance reasons. But I would say that you should try and work in some of the smaller elements in there as well to really kind of like actually sell it a bit more when you're exploring it. So wherever there's an area where the player can get closer to it, I would have much smaller elements worked in to really kind of like just bring in that sense of scale a bit more. Because when you just scale the whole thing up, it loses some of that. It loses some of that scale and that importance when you put it in. So these things are really, really massive. And while you would get, kind of like bigger leaves on bigger trees in some context, kind of you still want some of those smaller forms in there as well to really give you that detail. So I would say don't just scale it, like actually account for the size you're working to. I would also say that like while I think the model work is really good on this, I think the texture work could do with a little bit more. Like it's really, really uniform in your curvature assignment. Like it's like you've baked out a curvature map and just put that over it and then left that as is, rather than thinking about kind of what the curvature of the surface actually represents. So when you get that edge, what should be happening? What and how should you be representing that where? The curvature of the surface is really like it's the starting point for where you can start to identify information. It's not just an overlay that you should be putting on top of the texture surface. You should be really going in and then using that as the reference point, but then really thinking about how that wood surface should go. It's also looking just quite noisy as well on there, so I'd maybe kind of like just smooth out some of those areas a little bit more, and just again speaking to that texture variation. You really want to have that break. Like, don't be afraid to put some smoother information in there instead to really kind of like break it out. Because you've got to think about this in the context of the rest of the piece, right? Not just as a standalone texture.
Yeah, the back to that comment about the curvature, definitely adding some more variation and breakup to it. Right now, it's very, very uniform, which is almost giving you an outliney look to the whole thing. So, breaking up that curvature so it's not uniform across the whole surface is definitely going to introduce a little bit more variation. So we have spots of it where it's kind of highlighting some of the details and some where it's not. So yeah, something to keep in mind.
Yeah, especially stuff like this, right? Like you want to try and highlight the areas where you would actually expect it to be. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with it running, but we'll give it a go. See how far we can get. And then I think we'll probably have to wrap it up because I don't want to steal too much of Javier's time on this stuff. Like stuff like this is pretty good, right? So this is where my pen doesn't work or something like that. But you've got this edge here. So like what kind of what color should this wood actually be if it's treated, and then how likely is it to start getting damaged and worn? So when you've got this like in a curved surface, you're probably less likely to see some damage and wear. But like on this stuff, you're definitely you're going to start seeing a bit more. So like you can start bringing it in here, so like getting a bit more aggressive with it, and then start to kind of like fade it back as you get kind of further up the surface, and then you'll get a little bit more variation in it, and you'll start to kind of see a little bit more, and then kind of like again you can start kind of like really kind of like using it to pop that edge and that highlight, without kind of going kind of too crazy on it. I spend too much time doing this, but you can kind of start pulling it out a little bit more, and you'll start to get kind of like a much nicer kind of like edge wear from that on there, rather than kind of what you've got at the moment where it's just these lines are so uniform that you lose any of the kind of like the shape and the form from it. So yeah, stuff like that. is worth having another go at.
Yep.
Oh, right. I think we are probably at time. Let's check through, see if there's any quick areas that we could do. I don't think we've got the time for it, unfortunately. So that is all we have time for. Thank you for joining me today, Javier. That was really good.
Yeah, no,
it
was awesome. Pleasure is all mine. Lots of great stuff.
Yeah, you're going to be hanging around the Discord for the rest of the jam. So you'll see him popping up and giving you feedback and things. Don't be afraid. Keep getting stuff posted in the art feedback request. Obviously, we can't get to absolutely everything that we see because there's so many people, but we will get to as many as we can and go through that stuff. Thank you for joining everyone today and for catching in and asking the questions in the channel. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Thanks.